Hey, Global Village. Okay, I want to talk about artificial general intelligence. And part of the reason is it's come to my attention that a lot of really big tech companies now are actually hinting that AGI is something that's on the horizon, maybe, I don't know, 2 to 5 year time frame. And I tend to think that is complete hyperbole. So here I'm going to talk about it and see whether we can figure out what's really going on here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just clarify a little bit of terminology. And the reason why I want to do that will become clear later on in the conversation. So first of all, let's consider what is sentience. So sentience is to make the claim that something has subjective experience. So for example, you wouldn't claim that a rock is sentient, i.e. it doesn't have subjective experience. But what about, say, a human-made object like a clothing peg? Would you say a peg has sentience? Does it have subjective experience? Is there something that it's like to be like for a peg? And I think we know that the answer to that is also no. Let's move up the scale a bit. What about a starfish? Possibly. There could be something to be like a starfish. What about a cat and a dog? Yep, now we're talking. I think we've definitely got some sentience going on there. And of course, humans. Alright, so that's what sentience is. It just means that it has subjective experience. What about consciousness? Okay, the best way to describe consciousness is to see how we might use it in the English language. So let's say Jim is very self-conscious about the fact that he has to be home by 5 p.m. because his wife will be very angry if he isn't, as it's actually their wedding anniversary. Or you could say Bill is self-conscious about the fact that he's got a pimple on the end of his nose because he has a hot date this evening. Now, to be conscious requires basically a theory of mind. And in other words, the only way we can be having this conversation right now is because we are conscious entities able to engage in a conscious discussion between ourselves. So in a sense, you can regard consciousness as the next level up from sentience. So let's now just stop and think about what is the current state of the art for AI. And when you peel back the layers, it basically comes down to deep learning, which is machine learning with neural networks. And that hasn't changed. There's been no qualitative breakthroughs since that particular breakthrough was made several years ago now. Now, of course, when we encountered large language models, you might be mistaken for thinking that we had another significant or material breakthrough. But that's not the case. They just realized that using deep learning against large volumes of text yielded very useful results in the forms of chatbots. So that wasn't actually some massive, technological breakthrough. It was just the way we leveraged neural networks and deep learning in the space of language. Okay, so I think what we then want to discuss is how do we define artificial general intelligence? Because as it turns out, it is very poorly defined. It's hard to get a clear or concise definition. So I'm going to make an attempt at defining what I would expect from an AGI, and then we can talk about whether we think that's 2 to 5 years on the horizon. So let's consider how a human learns as versus how we train a neural network. So with a neural network, let's say we're using one to train it so that it can detect the image of a cat in a picture. We of course pump in hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of images of cats into our neural net, and we basically strengthen all the neurons up to the point where it can now identify pictures of cats with about 99.9% accuracy. But that's not how a human does it. With a human, all a human needs is an understanding and comprehension of what a cat is, maybe through personal experience. You've got a pet and it's a cat. Now, the instant someone shows you an image of a cat, and it could be in any number of different settings, you are instantly cognizant of the fact that that is indeed a picture of a cat. So you manage to do that without being trained on all of these hundreds of thousands of images of cats. So there's something very different going on in your brain compared to just these classical, what they're calling deep learning neural nets. So that's the first point. Let's also consider this. Let's say you put an image of a cat that happened to be sitting in the middle of a star field out in the vacuum of space, and you just pump that through the image processor and it just comes back and say, yeah, it's a picture of a cat. Now, of course, if you show that to a regular human being, they're immediately going to realize that there's something fishy going on. They're going to be like, this picture's been doctored, it's been photoshopped, because, cats don't just like float around in space. It's just not a thing they do. And AI isn't going to be able to understand or comprehend that context is just completely wrong. It doesn't have reasoning skills. You can train it to do things by feeding it data. And this is not artificial general intelligence. This is very targeted artificial intelligence, where you know up front what type of processing, what type of activities you want it to perform. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, look, with a large language model, you can go to it and you can say, can cats survive in outer space? And of course, it'll come back and say, no, cats can't do that. And you'll say, well, there you go. It's actually gone and reasoned out that cats can't survive in outer space, but it hasn't. All it's done is leveraged off the neural network, the training data that you've given to it, which in this case is enormous amounts of data through Wikipedia, Reddit, and wherever else they're stealing data from, and it managed to, basically using its training, to detect that based on the question you asked, the appropriate answer was the one that it gave you. And you think that means it's somehow reasoned out that cats can't survive in space. But it didn't reason anything. Let me ask you this. Do you think these AI chatbots, do you think they are sentient? In other words, is it something to be like a chatbot? Does a chatbot have subjective experience? Well, I'm going to put it to you that it absolutely does not. It's just a pure technological artifact. In essence, it's no different from any other computer program that any person has written, other than the fact that it's designed to be trained. So in that sense, it's not a traditional program, but it executes lines of code and performs logic functions. And it's loosely modeled on what we might call a neural network, but only in the very loosest sense possible, because we really don't understand a whole lot about how the human brain works. And I think, we kind of alluded to that when we talked about, how humans learn versus how we train these neural nets. Very, very different. So when it comes to an AGI, what I would expect of it is for it to learn in a way far more similar to a human. And I would put it to you, the current state of the art has absolutely no clue how that might work. You're not going to achieve that by just tacking together hundreds of composite neural networks so that it kind of fakes it, so you think it looks like it's AGI because it has a lot of targeted training over a large spectrum of different fields. That's not AGI. That's just faking it with a lot of AIs kind of combined together to look like AGI. Bottom line is, I believe you would need a qualitative breakthrough, of which I don't believe the current industry has the slightest clue what that might be. It's still very much in the realms of science fiction. So, end of the day, this whole idea that AGI is something that could happen, to my mind, it's nothing but tech dudes basically scamming venture capitalists for their money by kind of promising something that really is completely unfounded and unreasonable. Do I have anything else to say on the matter? I really don't think so. I don't know. It irritates me. Look, it's not that I'm against AI. As I've previously mentioned, I use AI to help me, especially given my visual impairment, because it just helps me be a writer, which I really love. There are absolutely appropriate use cases for artificial intelligence. I'm not anti AI. I just think that we need to not be hyperbolic about it. Understand at the end of the day, it's just another software product. And like anything, it's can be used for good and bad. Anyway, Bendy out.